Wandering around a parking lot is always a great test to see how well a car navigates day to day. One thing that always surprises me about this Nismo model is how well it handles things like speed bumps and so on. The car is fairly low down to the ground for a kind of consumer level low suspension. I haven't had to do any crazy angles with this thing. Speed bumps are fine. That's been kind of nice. I think the other thing that definitely warrants some comment is in the Nismo, we have these really gorgeous Recaro seats. Bolsters are leather. The inserts are kind of a suede Alcantara fabric, and they feel really good. The seats are nice and supportive. Your shoulders are in. You make a turn and you are stuck here. Now, as you can see, I am a big guy. I am not small. I am 6'1", 6'2", in that range, and about 250. When I first sat in this seat, it felt a little pinched. I was kind of concerned that my rear and my sides were not going to be comfortable, and I have to say that after a couple of minutes, everything was fine. So if you're a man or woman of a little larger stature and you're kind of concerned about the supportiveness of these seats, you certainly go give it a shot, because I know that this is not going to be for everybody. The only thing that's kind of terrible about these seats is the adjustments. There's plenty of adjustment to be had where you can raise the rear and the front. You can move the seat back kind of forward and back, and certainly the seat itself will slide forward and back. Everything is a knob. It's fine for kind of your basic adjustments. It's actually right here along your side, so your left hand reaches down really easily. But the backrest is way at the hinge back here. So you almost have to do it with the door open, get it settled, and then take off. And that part kind of sucks. In the whole scheme of things, if you're the only one driving it, you adjust it once and you're fine. But if you do change the car with other people, that's going to be annoying. So some of these gear shifts are a bear for me. That's not saying that this clutch is bad or that this shifting is bad. I'm just not quite used to it. The stock exhaust on the Nismo is actually a pretty good sound. I've heard some complaints that it's a little too quiet, but I don't really like loud pipes. I don't know why. I just think it ends up sounding fake after a while when you add too much burble to a V6. But I think it sounds good. The initial startup sounds wonderful. The way it revs is great. I do have to say that when you get up in the rev range, the sounds from the engine bay completely drown out the sounds from the exhaust. So if you're a big exhaust fan, it's probably still not going to be good enough for you, to be honest. I'm going to try really hard not to get hit by a FedEx truck. Like, my goal right now is just not to get hit. Phoenix, weird. Just gotta say. It is surprisingly well-mannered on the freeway. Your average smooth road freeway feels really good in this thing, and certainly the expansion joints you feel, but otherwise it's not too bad, and the noise is pretty cool. Oh, the big downside of the 370Z. You know, you'll see this in reviews, and this is the one I'm completely on board with. The visibility in this car is awful. It is awful to the point that I'm surprised it made it out of the gate in 2008, 2009. It is terrible. Looking out your right-hand side, it's actually not bad. You've got a good-sized window there. That rear, like, little quarter window is fine, but behind you, you get a little slit. It's like an old convertible, or like an early 2000 Mitsubishi Eclipse kind of rear window, where it's just like, there's a window. On your left, it's useless, completely useless. You've got this huge pillar here, and you've got a window here. You can see the person directly to your left. That is fine. You can't see the quarter window behind you. The owner of this vehicle installed, just from like a hardware store, those little wide-angle mirrors and mounted them on the outside mirrors. And that is the way that you pull this off. That is a nice Ferrari. Way to one-up me. And then you've got the 4Runner trying to prove something. So for me, I'm looking for a secondary car. This is not going to be a daily driver. I don't think I would want a 370Z as my daily, even though it's capable. It's not going to be your most comfortable daily driver. I don't necessarily want to sit around in rush hour traffic in this thing. But as a secondary car, then we're starting to talk. And in that case, you know, my priorities are completely different. Do I care that the nav system is out of date? No. Do I care that the Bose audio kind of sucks? A little bit. In terms of audio systems, it's not awful, but the 2016 Maxima I had with the Bose system certainly sounded better than the Bose system in here. It just starts to sound a little tinny, and I don't think it's because of the vehicle. If you're at a track, the only soundtrack you're listening to is probably out of the engine bay, so it doesn't matter so much. It's cross-shopping the 370Z. I feel like the competition for this thing is really just a few vehicles. You've got the Genesis Coupe, which is fine. You've got the Toyota 86 and the Subaru BRZ, which are also fine. You can probably link in, I don't know, the Ford Mustang if you're feeling frisky. But going back to the interior, if I compare the interiors of the competition, this is actually really nice. It's not quite as modern as some of the options. Nissan's 7-inch infotainment system is not that great. You look at some of the gauges here on the left, and they're good gauges, but the display for your mileage and your fuel gauge and so on, it kind of shows its age a little bit. But that doesn't make this necessarily a bad interior. The textures kind of remind you of times past, of harder plastics, but it's not that bad. Everything is pretty soft touch around here. But ultimately, what you want is something that as a driver you're comfortable in. And in that way, the 370Z, I think, is an incredible cabin. Now, the other thing you'll see in a lot of reviews is, of course, they're trying to compare a new one to what the newer competition is, and it's almost not fair. I am not going to buy a 2019 370Z. I don't think it makes sense. One, I can't afford it. Two, I think that for the money, you're going to find something nicer, especially in the Nismo trim. The Nismo trim, brand new, you're talking about mid-40s. Now, because it's so old, I would probably guess that a dealer is willing to cut some deals, and you'll probably get it in the upper 30s for a fully decked out model. The better buy, if you're just looking for a car to mess around with and you want the warranty, is probably going to be like the Sport Package. Sport Package at a minimum, because the base model, well, it'll start like right around 30. You don't get a lot of the nicer features. You don't get the rev matching, which I think is super cool. You don't get the limited slip differential. And once you don't have that, you can install a limited slip differential, but you can't add the rev matching capability. And so you're kind of starting a little hobbled. The Sport Package is not that much more, and you get a lot more for it, and you can do things from there. Going back to the competition a little bit, it warrants some more discussion. So, again, if you're looking for like a rear-wheel drive, potentially even all-wheel drive sport coupe, chances are you're thinking about maybe taking it to a track or doing something else besides being a daily driver. I have no interest in this vehicle as a daily driver. Just the ride quality alone, on a smooth road, it's awesome. It feels great. But even just a road like this, you know, it's a little older, there's a lot of patches and so on. This feels not jarring, but not comfortable. Like, I just would not necessarily want a road trip in this car. Now, again, going back to the competition now, you're competing against other rear-wheel drive coupe. On one side, you've got something like the Genesis Coupe or even the Mustang, where you get some rear seats. They're a little bit more of a touring coupe, and so they have some more comforts and a little more flexibility for day-to-day driving. You lose some weight and you're in the 370Z. You lose some more weight and a significant amount of power and you're in the Toyota Twins. And the neat thing about those is, as a handling car, they are fantastic. Dipping into a curve on those or just tooling around on a nice windy road, it feels like you are in a race car. even without a lot of power. And that's what a lot of Miata owners talk about with their vehicles, where once the car has some momentum, it's a really fun car to drive. The nice thing about the 370Z, while I would probably say the handling isn't quite as good, mostly because she got a big butt, even with that, the handling is fantastic, but it actually has some power to go with it. Your tunability kind of, I'm going to maybe say drops a little bit, because the Toyota Twins have less expensive tuning options to bring up the power, but at that point you've brought the power up to about the level of the 370Z. The car is lighter, and that helps, but I don't know, you've unloaded a bunch of money and you've got a car that's maybe about on par with this one. I think in that regard, especially in the used market, the 370Z offers an incredible value, and it has proven itself reliable enough that it's actually worth keeping around for a while. Another complaint that I hear a lot on forums and with YouTube reviews is from the road noise. It is kind of loud in here, but the difference is, compared to, for instance, the 2013 Genesis Coupe that I had for a while, that was a base model. I don't know if they changed sound deadening or anything like that in upmarket models, because I don't know, I haven't driven one of those. But in the base model, you heard road noise. But the difference was, it felt cheap. It felt like it was coming through every body panel. It felt like it was coming up through your seat. It felt like they just kind of phoned in the construction of the vehicle. And that always bothered me about the vehicle, because the great thing about the 2-liter turbo was you were in the upper 200s for horsepower, and that was a fun thing to swing around. But the day-to-day was awful. And I don't even think I would pick that car as a track car, because it just felt like it was going to come apart. That's not the case here. So what would I change about this vehicle to make it the perfect vehicle? A little bit of a modernization of the infotainment system. There's a lot of buttons here and not a lot of use, which is a little disappointing. In terms of being a driver's car, I love this transmission. I love the pedal feel. I love these seats. I love the response. I'm not a huge fan of the steering wheel. I think that in terms of modernization of this, what I would really like is if this was a D-shaped wheel, which is a personal thing. Like, not everybody's into it. I'm into it. I like the D-shaped wheel, and I would like the steering wheel itself to be thicker. I really feel like this might be the same wheel that existed in like the previous generation Maxima up until about 2015. And it's fine, but it's not great. And so the controls are fine, whatever, but it's just not, I feel like it needs to be meatier. And if I were to get one, if I could figure out a way to swap in the 8th gen Maxima steering wheel, the D-shaped one, I think that would be perfect, honestly. I wish these gauges were more useful. The 3 gauges in the center, I think it's a cool idea. It's a great design choice. I don't necessarily care about my voltmeter, and I definitely did not want a clock as a gauge in my secondary gauge cluster. What I think is funny is I'm kind of coming up with a lot of these weird idiosyncrasies that I'm not sure I like about the car, or things that I would change, and yet it really does not affect in any way how much I like this car. I am really into how this feels. And the things that kind of bother me about the modern reviews of this car right now, all they really talk about is how dated the platform is, because of course it's a 10-year-old vehicle that has had a couple of light refreshes, but at its core it's pretty much the same. And then they're judging it based on that. I think it is a tough sell, a $45,000 car riding on it's a 10-year-old car. I think that's tough. But look at it from the other side. There are not a lot of cars like this right now. And you got to look at it a little bit from that perspective. You have an incredible driver's car, in my opinion. And their complaints, where they talk about the steering that you can feel everything through, and they talk about how the engine noise is a little gruff and raw and truck-like at high revs, and they talk about how the infotainment is out of date and the materials on the dashboard are not up to snuff and blah, blah, blah. And then meanwhile, you watch every single one of those. And if you go and look, if you're the kind of person like me who's stumbled upon this because you've been looking at reviews of this thing, every single one of them gets in, sits down, buckles up, hits the accelerator and goes, wow, I like this. Because it speaks to something that you're not finding as much anymore. And that is this connectedness to the road and to your vehicle. You get into a 370Z, particularly with a manual. I'm not going to poop on people who get the automatics. That is more power to you. If that gets you into the vehicle you love and it makes it work for you, do it. Absolutely do it. There's nothing wrong with using a paddle. I just like getting the stick shift. So 6-speed manual, and you get in this car, you're on the road, and you feel the bumps through your seat. Not in a cheap way. You're not chattering your teeth. Nothing's falling apart. But you're right there. Through the wheel, you feel the road. You feel the communication from the steering. When there's a bump, your steering moves, you know you need to correct. Through the pedal, you can feel when you are accelerating and all that kind of stuff. This is not drive-by-wire. It's right there. And this gear shift, right? You feel on this stick, this transmission is moving around. Not in a cheap way again, but you are directly connected. And I love that. I love that visceral sensation of driving, and that is what I'm looking for, and that is what I want. And if I'm getting a secondary car that I'm going to use to rip around a track or to work on or to mod or to whatever, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And I feel like there's not a lot out there that has that same feeling. I like this. I like it a lot.